Hello, everybody. How are you doing? This is S. Anthony Thomas. This is the S. Anthony Says podcast, episode number 487. And I'm going to call this episode Caitlin Clark, the Fonz, and Mr. Oh No. I'll explain. Now, actually, this episode was going to be called Mr. Oh No, but some Caitlin Clark stuff came up when I went to the store to get something for lunch. And I was really kind of shocked by it in a way. Because I'm getting my food and I run across some street dudes that I knew from back in the day. Hardcore basketball fans, and they started breaking into a conversation about basketball. But were they talking about the guys? No. Were they talking about college basketball? No. They were talking about, you know who, the star of the moment, Caitlin Clark. They were extolling the virtues of her shooting and her game and how great she was. And then they started talking about how some other ladies are coming up in college who are awesome also. They didn't talk about lady basketball back in the day. They didn't really have anything negative to say about it. They just never brought it up. But now, all of a sudden, because of the buzz around Caitlin Clark and all the things that are happening around her, now these hardcore basketball dudes are rushing home. And they said it, rushing home because they wanted to see the end of the game because Caitlin Clark was on television and they wanted to see it. Big change. Because every time I turn on my TV, and mostly when I turn on my laptop or go on my phone and I see people talking about Caitlin Clark, there's either people talking about how great she is for the game, and then there's people saying little snarky things and taking shots at her. Must be a big pain in the butt to be her having to listen to all of that crap and get, cheap shots and all. It must be pretty bad. But when I thought about what's happening to her, it reminded me of my childhood and one of my favorite shows when I was a little boy, Happy Days. And for those of you that are in the audience that are kind of young, there was a show that came on in the 70s and early 80s. That's where the character, the Fonz, Henry Winkler's character, came about. And it was a very, very popular show. It was a gigantic show at one point. But when it came on, it was a good show. And the Fonz wasn't on. And then when he was on, he wasn't prominent. But once they started paying attention to the Fonz character and he put on that leather jacket, all of a sudden, he became the most prominent part of that show. And the show became a number one show and stayed number one for a long time. Now, I don't know whether or not the show would have stayed on that long or been that impactful without the Fonz. It probably wouldn't have, but he was there and it did become impactful because of the Fonz. And I'm pretty sure the Fonz character probably made the most money because he was the biggest star on the show. But what happens is, nobody was trying to trip Henry Winkler, who played the Fonz, to make him fall down the steps. Well, I guess the Fonz got hurt. I guess I'll have to be the star of the show now, right? Because it doesn't work that way. Sometimes when that person comes into the game, whatever game it is, and for some reason the audience or a big audience or something catches fire because of them and they come and become a part of what you're working on, they bring that big audience and everybody gets more money. Now, will you make as much money as that person? Probably not. But you will definitely make way more money than you would have made had they not brought their audience to the show. I know this for a fact, obviously on a much, much smaller scale. But I was playing a comedy club and we were doing pretty good. We were doing pretty daggone good. But then a radio guy who had a nice radio show in that particular town was added to the show. And everybody found out that this particular person was making more than everybody else on the show. In fact, he was making his salary was about 60% of our salaries combined. So he was blowing the doors off of what we were making. And everybody was mad about it. And they were angry. And they were, I can't stand this guy. He ain't nobody. He ain't even a comic. We're comics. He ain't nothing but some stupid DJ. How come he's making all this money? And that's what they were saying. But even though I was only a kid at the time, I wasn't even old enough to drink at this point. There was something in me that said, wait a second. Before they added this guy to the show, we were doing good on Fridays and good on Saturdays, right? But, sometimes we're at 85% capacity. But when this guy showed up and he started hosting the shows, we didn't even know what anything but a sold out show looked like, including during the week. Wednesday shows, Thursday shows, still sold out. They were sold out even when he wasn't on the show, because when he started coming, what he did was he brought the show, the club, the comics to the awareness of this guy's vast audience. And we got to ride on the wave of that. And it took them a while to stop being jealous and realize what was going on. right? A couple of them messed with his microphone. A couple of them didn't protect him when there were hecklers in the audience. They waited a little longer to stop the hecklers. There was a lot of jealousy going on. But I looked at what I was making now that he brought that big audience in. Now, was he as good a comic as any of us? No, of course not. He wasn't really a comic. He just kind of dabbled in comedy. He was good at radio. But look at the audience he brought in. Whoa, sold out on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday. Whoa, all the time, right? When we would play anywhere near his radio audience area, you would come to town, you'd put my name would be in the newspaper, headlining this club, this guy, meaning me, and the place would be packed. Why? Because of me? In some ways, maybe, but for the most part, it was that guy's audience who had seen me on the show with that guy, and I had been mentioned on that show because I was nice to that guy. Oh, you're the guy that was on the Whoop-de-Whoop show. Yeah, well, you weren't on the show, but he mentioned you, man, and we came to see you. You were funny. All of a sudden, I'm getting people coming to see me because of that guy. Even after that guy stopped doing comedy, just concentrated on radio, there were still people that had seen me and they came to see me and they came to see the other people too because we were on the show with that guy. Sometimes you got to look at it logically and realize, yes, this person is coming in. Yes, maybe they didn't pay the kind of dues we paid. Yes, we understand that. But a lot of times, the tide will rise. All the boats get lifted up. You can't be jealous. You can't be annoyed. You got to look at the bigger picture. So when I see people take shots at this kid, and I'm not defending this kid because I don't know, I shouldn't say kid, even though to me she's a kid, I'm old enough to be her dad. This young lady, I'm just defending people. I'm just letting people be aware of the fact that, yes, it may not be fair when you look at the fact that this particular person may not have paid the dues that you paid, but what they are doing is bringing in a wave, bringing in new people, exciting people that weren't excited about the product before. And if they're excited about the product, that means they're coming towards the product, WNBA, or in our case, the comedy club. They're coming to it with a positive expectancy. And when they come with a positive expectancy and see what you do, it'll benefit you in the long run. It really will. If they were mad at Henry Winkler when he played the Fonz because the Fonz character was so popular and they had an unharmonious set and the show fell apart because he didn't like it, maybe he would do a Fonzie spinoff because he didn't like those guys. All of a sudden their show tanks and then the Fonzie show blows up. You wouldn't like that. But they were cool. They worked with it. And everything. What happens? They had a classic show that ran for a long period of time and became one of the greatest shows of all time, one of the most successful shows of all time, and turned the characters into icons. Eventually, the ladies of the WNBA are going to get used to Caitlin Clark being there. And what's going to happen is if her popularity maintains what it is and stays the way it is and maybe even grows, it'll give everybody an opportunity to get endorsements. Give everybody an opportunity to make that bread. And that's the truth. And in my case, like I said, everybody was jealous of this guy because he wasn't really a comedian. He was just a radio guy with a big audience. But we all made a lot more money. Not as much money as he made, but we made a lot more money because all the boats were pulled up by the rising tide. That's all I got to say about that. Now back to what I was actually going to talk about. And that was the Caitlin Clark and the Fonz portion of the episode. Now we're going to move into the Mr. Oh No section of the episode. And when I talk about Mr. Oh No, I have to give you a little bit of a history about my history. I moved out. I spent the majority of the 90s pursuing my comedy dream in California. And before I was doing pretty good here on the East Coast, down in my hometown. Actually, the entire area I was doing pretty good. But I wanted to go to California, and I'm not one of those people that's good at resting on his laurels. I'm not a good laurel rester. Can't do it. So even though I was doing pretty good in the comedy, there were days when I was off and home and I could rehearse, but I wanted to make some money. You don't make money rehearsing. So I started to take jobs that I normally wouldn't take, but I also didn't take an office job because of my comedy, I couldn't be in an office. Sometimes I wasn't even in the same city, but I could take day labor jobs. I could take jobs where I could only work a couple of days a week and just stockpile the money for California. And that is what I chose.